How's it going, guys? Cracked Rack here. Apparently you guys really liked those earlier videos I made about getting fired and thought they were hilarious, which is kind of a shock to me because upon releasing those videos I thought I was just gonna be bullied and laughed at for being so fucking retarded I somehow managed to get fired from like 8 fast food jobs. Anyway, this story happened 4 years ago when I was about 16. I had just moved to Billings, Montana with my parents after some family drama, and if you aren't aware, the only things that are in Billings, Montana are toothless hookers and Burger Kings. So when I was 16, I was under the delusion that I was going to be a rock star someday, and the only way I was going to be able to do that was if I somehow earned some cash to buy some killer camera equipment so that I could make some awesome music videos. What ended up happening to that very same equipment 2 years later was I used it to pretend to go on a meth-fueled murder rampage of cartoon characters I didn't like. But you better not tell little 16-year-old Matthew that. He might cry. Anyway, after doing some contemplating, little 16-year-old me decided that the best way to get money for equipment was to get a shitty throwaway job. Now keep in mind, these events actually occurred long before any of my other firing videos. At this point in time, I was a firing virgin. I hadn't been fired anywhere, and I was also an actual virgin too. Anyway, so after deciding that I needed to get a job, I headed out onto the dirty, grimy streets of Billings to see if I could find any restaurants or bars that were hiring. Keep in mind, at this point in time, I had dropped out of high school, so I didn't have any responsibilities all day, so I could pretty much just do whatever I wanted. The first place I went to was this really sketchy, ugly bar for old people, because they had a now hiring sign hanging outside their window. Well, actually saying that it was hanging is giving the place too much credit. It was fucking swinging by a lone string, holding it up in a crooked fashion. So anyway, I go in there, and the only person behind the bar was this old woman, probably in her late 30s or early 40s. I took a seat a few feet away from her at the bar and asked if they had any job applications. The woman responded not by giving me a job application, but by telling me how cute I was. Then, seconds after that, a group of older women the exact same age as the bartender approached me and started loudly exclaiming how cute I was and how they could just eat me up, and one of the women actually put her hand on my leg. At this point, I hadn't a single clue what kind of fucked up pedophile MILF factory I had just stepped into, and I wanted no part of it. So I got up off my seat and headed back out to the streets to find a job. After walking around the dirty, dusty, nasty streets of Billings for hours at a time, I finally came across a Burger King that had a giant hiring sign out front. Filled with false relief, I walked inside and asked for a job application. With this, I was then greeted by the manager of this location, who looked like Edmund Kemper. He was gigantic, at least 6'5", had little to no teeth, and he smelled like a fresh abortion on a summer day. He greeted me by saying, "Hello, I heard you were looking for a job." Though unbeknownst to him, right when he said hello, it felt like a giant bag of rotting shit flew out of his mouth and exploded onto my face. This guy's breath smelled like he had been deeply eating the ass of Susan Boyle every day for 5 years. But I was nice to him regardless because I wanted that job. After expressing interest in the job, the manager didn't even make me fill out an app and just interviewed me on the spot because they were so desperate for employees. I would later find out why. So the first major red flag about this job position was that I was the only young, fit, healthy person in the entire crew. Every other employee was either 400 pounds, a chain smoker, or a woman who looked like they were being sex trafficked in said Burger King. This was not a happy place. But my first day was the next day, and I was just happy that I had finally gotten a real job. So fast forward to my first shift the next day, I didn't have to do anything but observe the other employees to get a general idea of what my job was. In theory, this sounds easy, right? Well, it was like watching a fucking horror movie. Sitting in the dark corner of a Burger King kitchen while watching 50-year-old 400-pound chain smokers have screaming matches at each other over things like oversalting the fries is actually horrifying. Literally, I was genuinely traumatized after my first day working there. I was somehow covered in fry grease even though I hadn't touched a single thing in the kitchen, and I had a massive migraine from the amount of toxicity that was occurring in that kitchen. It was just a fucking nightmare. As time went on and I started actually performing my shift responsibilities, I really started to notice just how toxic and awful the management was. And from what I've heard, this isn't even just exclusive to that Burger King. Burger King notoriously has awful management and terrible, terrible employees. My manager in particular, the guy who looks like Ed Kemper, was a fucking prick. First off, behavior aside, he was a creep. He had just gotten divorced by his wife for cheating and was sleeping in his car outside of the said Burger King. He would frequently come into work crying. I'd literally take an order at the front counter and yell back, "Hey, let's get some fries started." And in response, I'd hear him fucking crying in the back while going, "I just miss her so much." I mean, he was so obsessive and creepy about his wife, I almost expected him to come into work one day with her head chopped off so he could put it in the deep fryer. But yeah, that aside, he was a fucking asshole to me. On my third day there, he was watching me prepare some fries, and I accidentally left the fry scoop in the pile of fries for less than a second, and he started screaming at me about how fucking stupid I was and how he was gonna write me up and ruin my career and get me fired. He was just a real piece of shit, and he wasn't even the only piece of shit there. There was another manager here who was about 500 fucking pounds, who would put horrible post-it notes all over the walls all day talking about how she could fire us instantly if she ever caught us breaking rules, and how if we even took 0.1% more food than we were supposed to on our lunch breaks, we would be fired instantly. My other coworkers weren't much better. In the roster of coworkers, there was also a mentally retarded man who should definitely not have been working there. I'm not trying to be rude, but the motherfucker literally couldn't string together a sentence and would drool all over everything, including the countertops where food went. And look, I get hiring the mentally disabled to give them opportunities, but maybe don't give the towering, drooling retard of doom responsibility over food that hundreds of people are going to be eating that day. Anyway, I only lasted 2 weeks at this Burger King. It was that toxic. I hated working there so much, I would actually cry before shifts because I dreaded walking into that kitchen of hell so much. Now, how I got fired is not an interesting story. Essentially, I just didn't show up to work one day, and as a result, I got like 15 extremely angry voicemails from the manager pretty much telling me I'm a piece of shit for not showing up to my Burger King shift. So I called them up the next day, said this is Matthew Holman, and I quit. And then I hung up. I received my paycheck in the mail a week later, and that's really the end of that. So the moral of the story here is to just never ever work at Burger King. I'm not saying don't work at fast food, because not all fast food is bad. Even though I've been fired from places like Starbucks and Taco Bell, at least I can say those places are competent and not pits of hell. The reason I got fired from those places was because of my stupidity. But good God, Burger King in particular is just completely fucking incompetent. The management hate their lives and take it out on the employees, and the food is disgusting. Burger King by far has the most greasy food of any fast food establishment, and being around that all day, every day will fuck your skin up and fuck your stomach up. Just don't work here. If you are considering getting a job here, go apply to KFC or literally anywhere else that treats their employees with a modicum of respect. How's it going, guys? Cracked Rack here, and today I have another irresponsible as fuck story for you all from yours truly. See, when I said that I've been fired from 8 different jobs in my life, I'm not lying or exaggerating. I've had a rough last decade, if I'm being quite honest. And today's video in particular is about the time that I got fired from Subway. Now, I'm sure a lot of you don't eat Subway because it's notoriously kind of a gross restaurant, and all of their food tastes exactly the same. But I worked there for about 3 months, and those 3 months were miserable. Now, I fucking despise fast food work with a passion. I genuinely think working in the fucking cartel would be less stressful. So this story takes place quite a few years ago when I was only about 16 years old. I had never had a job before, and I had just dropped out of high school because I'm a genius. And my parents were essentially giving me an ultimatum. Either I get a job, or I go to community college, or I get a girlfriend, or I get the fuck out and live somewhere else. So I chose to get a job. I was living in Billings, Montana at the time, which is a really shitty scumfuck town full of nothing but casinos and prostitutes. It's like one giant red light district. So the only place that was really hiring for anything serious was fast food, and the job I applied to in particular was a Subway. inside of a Walmart. Said Walmart was notorious for its criminal activity and mass shooter scares, so that was cool. So a day after I applied, I got the call to do an interview. I went over there that day, interviewed, and pretty much got the job within 2 days, which would be one of the biggest mistakes Subway has ever made, aside from, you know, the Jared Fogle stuff. I'll skip to my first day. My first day there, I learned 2 lessons. Lesson 1 is that humanity is a disgusting, depraved, selfish species. Lesson 2 was that fast food work was soul-sucking and never even gave you a second for yourself. You ever hear the saying, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean? That's something you'll hear a lot in the fast food industry. So anyway, on my first day, I met my coworkers, who were awful, if I'm being honest. You had this really fat lady there named Mandy, who was really flirtatious and annoying and constantly bitching about this or that. Then you had my manager, Cindy, who was pretty hot, but on that same accord, she was also a psycho bitch, who had threatened to write me a referral for doing the littlest things. Like, she threatened to write me a referral because I put too many olives on a sandwich once. Cindy, if you're watching this, your hotness will not get you that far in this life. I also had a few other coworkers, but they were weird, antisocial, nerdy basement dwellers with pube mustaches, who I didn't really feel comfortable initiating conversation with. Now, if you saw my video on how I got fired from McDonald's, my Subway downfall wasn't much different. The first incident I had was on my 5th day. I was making a gross roast beef mustard piece of shit sandwich for some hot girl, and 16-year-old me wanted to impress her because
I was a cool Subway employee.
So in the middle of making her sandwich, I said really loudly, "Want some mayonnaise on this, bitch?" I wasn't calling her bitch, I was referring to the sandwich as a bitch, you know, in a cool way. Like when you say, you know, like, let's get out of this bitch, or let's go do this bitch, or let's blow this bitch. But the girl thought I was calling her a bitch, and the manager and everyone else in the area thought I had just loudly called this girl a bitch. So my manager was like,
"Get in my office now!"
And we had a really awkward 15-minute conversation about sexual harassment and shit, and essentially I got written up. The second incident was about 2 weeks later, and this was my final incident at this location. I'll explain in a minute. Essentially, when Subway's closed, you have to take out all those little food trays, wash them, fill them with the next day's supply of food, then store them in the cooler. My manager told me to do just that, but it was my first time and she didn't show me how to do it properly. So when I filled them with food, I just started stacking them on top of each other in the cooler like some sort of fucked up Jenga game. You're probably not gonna believe me when I say this, but my manager went to double check on my work, opened the cooler, and every single tray I had stacked fell on top of her and spilled tons of condiments and pickles and shit all over her face. There was definitely a good splat of mustard on her tits. Now, she was furious with me, but I think she thought I was retarded because she was faking a smile and being super nice to me after this as if I was like a toddler. Long story short, she was about to fire me, but I revealed that night that I was actually going to be moving to a smaller town with my parents in 2 days, so she offered to transfer me to that small town Subway to work there. So instead of firing me, she just got me the fuck out of her hair and put me in someone else's. Fast forward a week later, I'm working at this small town Subway, and there's really only 4 people working there. There was the boss, who was this really creepy old divorced guy whose daughter threatened to shoot up a school, so that was that guy's reputation. Then the other 3 dudes were just redneck dumb shits in their late teens that didn't really care about anything. Those guys were like 17, and I'm pretty sure they all had children, to give you an idea. And working here was even worse than the other place. Because here, there weren't any hot chicks or any cool personalities or anything. It was just really old, angry Republicans who all wanted the exact same type of roast beef sandwich. There were also a lot of gay old swinger men who would constantly hit on me, which was extremely uncomfortable because I was like 16 and they were like 50. Now, how I got fired from this place is a bit anticlimactic. See, the owner would give me, at 16, a bunch of cigarettes to smoke in the back because he always had like a whole bunch of them. And when he gave me my break, instead of taking like 15 minutes, which I was supposed to do, I'd take like 45-minute smoke breaks, where I'd smoke like 5 cigarettes at a time and play on my phone. I had given up on my job at this point and didn't really care about the consequences. I was also late to work by like 10 minutes every single day without fail. I don't think I was ever on time to work once. So eventually one day I was serving this really old lady a sandwich and she was going on a rant about how responsible I was for having a job at that that age. And pretty much right when she was telling me this, my boss called me into his office and loudly fired me, like screaming at me. And I had to do the walk of shame out of that Subway without my uniform on, in front of that lady whose sandwich I was still in the process of making. So yeah, that's my story of how I got fired from Subway. How's it going, guys? Cracked Rack here, and it's probably obvious to you if you're a regular viewer of mine that I'm not the nicest guy, I'm not very agreeable. I've always been super opinionated and cocky. It's just in my DNA to be a douche, I guess. And my behavior over the last 5 or so years has gotten me in a lot of hot water and has garnered me a lot of wisdom on what not to do in life. I've been fired from about 8 different jobs in my life over the last few years. Today's story in particular is about how I got fired from the popular fast food chain McDonald's. Now, McDonald's is one of the worst places I've ever worked in my life. The working conditions are sweaty and gross, the managers are dicks, the hours are brutal, and there's no union protections 90% of the time with these jobs, so the management can just treat you like total dog shit with no consequences. Now, this story takes place a few years ago when I was 17, I was living with my parents, I had just dropped out of high school, and I wanted to start a short film project, but I didn't really have a budget, and I needed one really badly, so I applied to my local McDonald's so that I could get some income. They called me back the next day, interviewed me a week later, and then boom, I had the job. Easy as fucking pie. Now, when it comes to doing work on the computer, I'd say I'm almost professional level. I take great pride in my video productions and such. However, when it comes to physical labor, I am a useless, retarded sack of shit. And that is exactly what I was when working at McDonald's. The first day there, I realized instantly that it was a mistake to get a job at McDonald's. See, working at McDonald's is not as easy as people make it seem. To be even a halfway decent employee there, you need an amazing work ethic, the ability to work like hardcore 10-hour shifts with just no sweat, you need to be an amazing multitasker, have great communication skills, and you need to be appropriate at all times with the things you say and do. None of these things applied to me at all. First of all, I had no fucking clue how to assemble food, which was my job at first. Making a Big Mac was like rocket science to me. I am the shittiest chef of all time. And on my first day there, when I was preparing Big Macs and shit, I was so piss poor at it. There was an entire line of cars wrapping around the McDonald's multiple times because of me, because it took like an hour to fulfill even a few orders, and everyone hated me for it. So they took me off of chef duty and put me on the drive-thru, which was an even bigger mistake, because 17-year-old me thought the script McDonald's provided you for what to say to customers was stupid and frankly a waste of time. I wanted people to think I was a cool McDonald's employee who was rogue and didn't follow the rules. So instead of being like, "Welcome to McDonald's, how can I take your order?" I shit you not, I'd greet customers with a, "Hey, what's up, you want to order something?" And then when they drive up to the window, I'd start casually cussing in front of the customer to look cool. I'd be like, "Yeah, man, this fucking Big Mac is gonna rock your world," and just dumb shit like that. Very few people appreciated it and were just really uncomfortable. I also did something else super douchey, which was anytime a moderately attractive girl was at the drive-thru, I'd hit on her and give her my number, which sometimes would work in my favor, but most of the time it just made me look like a douchey creep. One time I hit on a girl at the drive-thru and my coworker tapped on my shoulder and revealed it was his wife, and he had multiple children, so that kind of put an end to that adventure. Now, I wasn't very well liked by my coworkers here, primarily because, well, I was a douchebag, but on top of that, every single person who worked there was extremely Christian. I lived in a town of 2,000 people, and most of them were Christians. And I'm this edgy, heavily tattooed, creepy guy, so pretty much every single person there at that McDonald's was extremely uncomfortable when talking to me. Like, there was this one 16-year-old tiny little white kid who every time I talked to him, he would just freeze up and become super awkward until I went away. I also had this super annoying coworker who happened to be gay, which no problem with gay people at all. I have gay family members myself. But the reason he was annoying is he was heavily egocentric and constantly put others down verbally. Very flamboyantly. He thought he was like fucking James Charles, but he was actually just an 18-year-old McDonald's manager. Every single time an attractive dude came into the building, he would always rush to the front of the McDonald's to take their order first, and then he'd talk about how hot the guy was for like hours. I hated this guy mostly because he always tattled on me every single time I did something mildly against the rules, which, I mean, yes, he was a manager, but it was ridiculous shit. Like, if I just took a few seconds to go to the back of the McDonald's and check my phone really quick, he'd instantly go tell the GM, and I'd get written up. Anyway, I lasted about 3 months at this job before I was officially fired. There were a few incidents that got me written up to the point of being fired, and I'll tell you about all 3 of my major fuck-ups. That resulted in job termination. The first thing I did was one day when it was just me and some redneck dude on duty, I found like this weird turkey baster thing on the cooking table, so I took a picture of it and posted it on Instagram with a caption stating that it was actually a vaginal douche. One of my coworkers saw it because I put it in the hashtag McDonald's, and he told the GM, and she wrote me up stating that I was making the brand look bad, which fair enough, I don't think anyone wants to eat a Big Mac that was next to a vaginal douche. The second incident with me was my most cringy mistake yet. This average-looking girl was at the front counter, and we were flirting because I had to get my douchebag quota in for the day, and I wanted to impress her with how extreme I was. So I started talking loudly with her about how much I like to fuck, and ways I like to fuck. My manager overheard this and put a stop to it as soon as it started. She was having none of it. She told me if I ever did that again, I would be terminated instantly. Fast forward a few weeks, and we're at the final straw of my relationship with McDonald's. See, it was like 10 p.m. and we were gonna close in like 20 minutes. There was really nothing to do because it was a slow day, and we had already cleaned everything up and prepared for closing, yet the stupid bitch manager there was yelling at everyone to still be in their work position, like they needed to stand upright and look productive for hypothetical customers that may or may not come in. But there were no customers coming in. It was like 10 p.m., so I decided to protest this by pulling out a stool, sitting on it, and playing on my phone in the middle of the McDonald's. This resulted in the manager immediately coming out and screaming in my face, "If you're not gonna do anything, just get out!" And that I did, friend. I drove home in the cold snow because it was winter, got on my computer, and didn't really give a shit at all about what had just happened. Overall, the moral of the story is, if you choose to subject yourself to a fast food job for whatever reason, just know that you have to essentially cut off your testicles and essentially be a puppet of the GM, or else your ass is grass. That's the end of this story. I've also been fired from Subway, Burger King, Taco Bell, Starbucks, and Chipotle. No joke, so if you want to hear those stories, just tell me. See ya. How's it going, guys? Cracked Rag here, and today I have the most requested story on my channel here for you all today. I've been hyping this one for a while. So as you know, I'm a bit retarded at working a 9-to-5 job, as evident by the fact that I've been fired from 8 different jobs in my life. Though of all the jobs I've ever been fired from, Taco Bell was the most pathetic one to get fired from, because do you know what the fucking qualifications of working at Taco Bell are? I shit you not, there was legitimately a retarded man working there who required a diaper at all times who was doing far better than me at Taco Bell. Now, this story takes place not too long ago, just a year ago when I had just turned 18. I was living with my dear brother, and he required I get a job immediately, as I was living with him temporarily so I could find a place to live that was cool in Portland, Oregon. And the only place that was really hiring near me at the time was a Taco Bell, so I applied there. Did a phone interview the next day, and then did some weird in-person interview the day after that, and it wasn't until my first day of actually working there that they revealed to me that I wasn't going to be working at the Taco Bell I interviewed at. I was actually going to be working at a Taco Bell on 82nd Street, which is the ghetto, that was owned and worked at almost exclusively by this extremely Hispanic and Catholic family that didn't speak a lick of English. And yes, there was a culture clash between me and them instantly. They did not train me at all, so my first day was legitimately just me awkwardly standing in the fucking kitchen while these 8 hardcore Mexicans craft burritos at an alarmingly fast rate before my very eyes. And when I did get a little bit of training and got familiar with the staff, they didn't even make an effort to speak English a little bit to help me out. Like, once I was at the drive-thru and the cash register for whatever reason was ringing up a $15 order as a $150 order, and I frantically asked for help from one of the employees who was staring at me by asking, "Hey man, can you please help me with the cash register? It's acting up." And he responded with,
"No puedo ayudarte, lo siento."
Like, what the fuck does that mean? How is that gonna help me at all? then he walked away. So yeah, I didn't get along too good with any of the staff. They never really helped me out with anything, and I just felt like a burden on them. I was also so shit at crafting food. I don't know if you know this about me, but I am the fucking worst chef of all time. I genuinely think a paraplegic 5-year-old could make a better burrito than me. However, one day I did manage to get in a bit of hot water with the managers. So one fateful day, I'd say maybe 2 weeks after I had started working there, I realized I forgot my pack of cigarettes at home. And I was a really heavy smoker, but I was only 18 and I was in Oregon, and you have to be 21 to buy cigarettes in Oregon. So I asked one of the employees if I could borrow their nicotine vape pen. One of them, who didn't speak English very good at all, but was a pretty nice person, managed to understand what I was asking and handed me his vape pen. Now, the pen looked very normal. It was sleek, black, didn't have any logos on it, and the oil in the cartridge was a golden brown, which is what I'm normally used to with my vape pens when I sometimes do indulge in the habit. So all was really fun, and I was outside smoking this vape pen, just chilling out in my break, checking Instagram. I maybe took like 30 or 40 little hits of this thing in rapid succession before I looked at the bottom of the vape pen, which happened to have a green weed leaf warning on it. And that's when I realized this was an intense weed vape that I had been puffing on consistently for the better half of 20 minutes. And after further inspection, it wasn't just any weed vape. It was a dab pen with a 90% THC cartridge in it, as it stated in extremely small text at the bottom of the vape. Turns out nicotine oil happens to look a whole lot like dab oil. Now, I started losing my shit because I had just vaped like 20 times the recommended amount, and it was lunch hour, and my shift was starting again in 5 fucking minutes. And yes, I felt it. This was the highest I had ever been in my entire life, and I've eaten a lot of edibles in my day. So I clocked back in, handed the pen back to my coworker who was just about to leave, so I didn't even get any support through this, and I started to take orders at the front counter. Some motherfucker with his stupid little shit kids came up to the front and started ordering this massive order. At least it was massive in my head. And I was in like this weird state of mental bliss. I was like completely dissociated but still working at the same time. So I didn't feel any anxiety in taking his order like I thought I would, but there was a reason for that. So after like 3 minutes of ordering, he gave me his name and it was super complicated, so I was like, what? How about I just put the number 2 as your name? And he was like, excuse me? Because he was apparently like a regular and actually family members with the fucking manager. And then he asked me to read back his order, and I did, and it was completely wrong. He ordered like, what was it, like 2 Gordita Crunches, an Icy, and a burrito. I, on the other hand, rang up 5 Crunch Wraps, 6 tacos, 3 Gorditas, and a fucking metric shit ton of nachos. And he was pissed. The total order was like $70, and he said he wanted to speak to my manager, so I told him he had nothing to worry about, and instead sent the order for number 2 through anyway, and they started making it. This caused him to get fucking furious and loud. He wanted to speak to my manager immediately. He also asked if I was stupid, which I was. So my manager heard this ruckus, came out to the front, and holy shit, they were apparently cousins and knew each other very well. So I was pretty screwed in my defense, and that's when my manager pulled me into his office and told me that after my 2-week trial run of working there, I was no longer needed. And yeah, that's the story of how I got fired from Taco Bell. This is kind of a short video, but there's not a whole lot to talk about. This is genuinely the shortest length I've ever had a job in my life. The moral of the story is don't do drugs at work, because you'll probably lose your job. How's it going, guys? Cracked Rag here, and today I want to tell you all the story of how I got fired from being a security guard in a dangerous city. So this story actually takes place right after my top 5 unknowns story, which I recommend you watch, link in description. Essentially, when I was 17 and a half, after months of doing YouTube as a full-time career with no other education qualifications, including no high school diploma, top 5 unknowns essentially fucked me, and I was left with no money, no platform, and no job. I had a few months till I was 18 at the time, and I was expected to move out on my own from my parents' house, so I contacted a family member in Portland, Oregon out of desperation, and I essentially made the move out to their place. And the plan was that I was going to live there for a few months while saving and slaving away at a fast food job so that I wouldn't end up homeless. This did not end up working out, as I was fired from like 5 jobs in a row before just straight up being kicked out of that household. I packed my shit, went to a cafe, researched some apartment listings on Craigslist on my phone, found one full of 18-year-olds, I called their apartment complex up and moved in with them that night, with the stipulation being that I would have the money to pay them rent before rent was due. Now, this story isn't about those people I lived with, but on a side note, they were pretty fucking awful. They were so low rent. It was 2 lesbians and a straight couple, and they would legitimately just fuck and have orgies in their room with the door open at like 3 in the afternoon. They fucked so much, I shit you not, I legitimately started chugging Black Velvet every single night that I lived there because I couldn't deal with their bullshit. Anyway, I pretty much got a job interview lined up the first day I lived there because I was slaving away so hard at getting a job, and this interview was for a company known as Securitas, which is a security company in Portland, Oregon that has a not so great reputation. After a week of grueling interviewing that required I bust out like 2 hours out of my way to get to the offices, I was finally set to do training, which was also like 4 hours away. It was all the way in Vancouver, Washington, and I lived in Beaverton, Oregon. These training sessions were so fucking brutal. It was like 13-hour sessions of watching anti-sexual harassment videos. There was very little actual training on how to conduct yourself in case of danger, but I did manage to complete training, and let's go ahead and skip to a week from the moment I did finish training. So my first day as a security guard, I kinda realized that I was way in over my head. I was expected, as an 18-year-old who looks like this, to go to Portland Skid Row and defend bars from bums trying to do heroin in front of the bars. Now, I'm not trying to be racist here, but the bums in this area were almost exclusively black men who were over 6 feet tall. If they wanted to, they could have easily broke my fucking back by wrapping their hands around my waist. Now, the first few days of work, I was guided by a much older and much stronger man who was the manager of Securitas, and I thought I'd always have a partner to do my patrols with around Portland. But little did I know, he was only going to accompany me for the first 3 days after showing me how to patrol. So day 1 of patrol by myself, and I was pissing my pants. I had to walk in front of like 3 different bars every hour and make sure there weren't any bums doing heroin or giving each other hand jobs on the entrance steps. Now, most of my interactions really just included me telling bums to fuck off, but sometimes I'd actually have some real sympathy for the people I was evicting. For example, there was one kid who was very clearly transgender and scared and homeless, probably as a result of their gender, and instead of being a giant cunt to him, I was like, hey, I get you're probably going through a tough time right now, but you can't be on this property. I know of a place you can go instead. That kind of stuff. However, most of the time, being rude was actually part of the job. There was one encounter I had, though, that was fucking horrible. I still get flashbacks of embarrassment due to it to this day. Essentially, one day I was doing a patrol, and there was a mid-40s Caucasian male wearing a button-up jacket and a flat cap, laying face down on the concrete entrance of a flea market. Now, Portland, Oregon has an incredible heroin issue. It's one of the biggest issues there ever, and I was pretty sure this guy was straight up dead of an overdose. He was laying face down, like I said, and he wasn't responding to anything. I lightly kicked his arm, and no twitch or response or anything. He appeared to be making a puddle of drool with his mouth as well. So I figured he was flat out dead, or at least in the process of dying. I called my boss, and he suggested I call the paramedics, so I called 911, got a fire truck full of medics on the scene, and they were pretty sure this guy was overdosing as well. They were super worried and setting up their equipment right there. They started slapping his fucking face around, trying to get a response, and eventually, he revealed himself. He wasn't actually dying at all. He was just drunk and pretending so I would go away. He sprung up from his position, scared the shit out of all of the paramedics, so they backed up, and he pulled out a knife and started swinging at one of the paramedics' throats. Now, I don't know if paramedics are trained to fight. If you're a paramedic watching this and you know how to fight, tell me in the comments if that's a thing, but this paramedic took this motherfucker down. down. He dead-armed him and tackled him with another EMS, but the guy managed to slither out of the tackle hold and ran away. These paramedics were so pissed off at me for calling them for this dude, and I probably should have just called the cops instead. I put them in so much danger by doing this. They drove off giving me a really pissed off stare. I mean, they might as well have just flipped me off as they drove away. Anyway, a few months into this job, I was not doing so hot. I was known as being one of the dopiest officers there because I was so young and unwilling to actually put myself in danger as a flex officer, and I pretty much overheard the fact that the management was essentially trying to find any excuse they could to sack me. So one day, one of the managers, who's way smarter at manipulation than I am, essentially asked me one day on a patrol we were doing together if I smoked weed, and he was acting like he loved smashing bitches and smoking weed on the weekends. He was just trying to appeal to me so that I'd say yes. And of course, I said yes when asked, and he immediately changed his attitude, forced me into the manager's office to take a drug test, which involved me sucking on a fucking weird cotton stick for 5 minutes before it was then put inside this weird cup that told them that I was indeed blazing. If you don't know, it's illegal to blaze as a security officer, and they fired my ass right there. And because of this, I lost my security license, and I can never be a security guard ever again. Not that I'm really too sad about that. So the moral of the story here, I suppose, is never risk your life for a job that doesn't pay you more than McDonald's. I mean, if you have to do it as a job and have no other options, then that's one thing, but if you can avoid it, definitely don't put your life on the line for any sort of minimum wage work. This is a pretty dangerous job. I mean, in that sector alone, there was a security officer a few years back who literally was shot to death just standing outside on 82nd Street of Portland, Oregon. You can look it up, I'm serious. Luckily, Securitas is going under. I fucking hate that company, because they just don't give a shit about anyone's safety. I mean, they literally wouldn't even give me a bulletproof vest because they said it was probationary. I'm genuinely under the belief that it'd be safer to be in the military, because at least in the army, you're given the proper tools to defend yourself and don't have to chase naked meth-smoking bums in small Section 8 housing stairwells for $15 an hour. I think it's super messed up this company hires 18-year-olds. I mean, I'm a small dude, but Jesus, there was some kids there doing dangerous shit that looked about 14. And I think it's so disgusting that these companies get away with just so much shit. Anyway, that's all for this video. See ya. How's it going, guys? Cracked Rag here, and today I have quite the story for you all. So it should be a given that this How I Got Fired series can't last forever. I'm not like the fucking fast food Jesus fairy. I haven't worked at an infinite amount of places. There's only really one more firing tale I have for you all today, and that's this video. How I Got Fired from Starbucks. So just for proof that I'm not bullshitting you guys like Luna would, here's a photo of me working behind the till of the Starbucks I worked at. As you can see, I'm thrilled about being there. Now, Starbucks is honestly one of the most miserable places I've ever worked. I mean, sure, places like McDonald's were horrible, but Starbucks definitely took the cake for the job I hated being at the most. So this story starts about 7 months ago. It was right after I had just gotten fired from Taco Bell. See, I was living with my family members at the time, and I was making my money through both YouTube and freelance projects online. But my family members are pretty old-fashioned, and they didn't really understand what I was doing and thought I was just some pathetic grown man playing on my computer all day. So I decided I was just going to get a dumb part-time job I didn't really care about to shut them up while I did my actual work, which ended up being a massive mistake. So I did some job hunting online and found that my local Starbucks was hiring, and I applied. What followed was one of the most tedious fucking rabbit holes of bullshit I've ever been through in my life in regards to a job. So they called me, told me they were interested in doing a phone interview, and then proceeded to not get back to me on the phone for probably about a month, which is just so shitty to do to your future employees. Anyway, they scheduled an in-person interview. I went. It was just me pretending I had a stick up my ass and putting on a fake smile to impress them. Then, before I could even start working, they said I needed to do another stupid fucking thing for them. I had to do an orientation 2 weeks out. So I had to wait another 2 fucking weeks for that shit. Then, fast forward to the orientation, it's one of the worst orientations I've ever been to. They set me and like 3 teenage girls down at a table because I guess those are the only types of people who work at Starbucks apparently. and we were all in this small, cramped, muggy office. The manager that was training us put the Starbucks guidelines manual on the table in front of us, which was like fucking 300 pages long, and then the stupid bitch manager there proceeded to read the 300-page manual, word for word, very slowly for about 5 hours. It was so boring, and it wasn't like they were feeding us pivotal Starbucks information. It was shit like, don't sexually harass people, and don't be vulgar. It was atrocious. Then after that shit, I found out they weren't even gonna let me start working at the Starbucks I lived next to, which is where I applied. They wanted me to bust my ass all the way down to Portland, Oregon from Hillsboro to go to this special Starbucks that had people who could train me. And I thought, you know, fine, I'll suffer through 2 weeks of bullshit for an easy, chill job that'll shut my family the fuck up. What ended up happening was not that. So I was bussing my ass down to the Starbucks every day and working my ass off in the hopes that this suffering would all be over with soon and then I'd be able to work at the location next to my house. Those 2 weeks were awful. See, this was right when COVID-19 was just becoming a thing and Starbucks was freaking out. We had to take so many dumb precautions just to do the most basic menial tasks, and it was miserable. I also watched an old lady die. She had a heart attack at the fucking Starbucks stand and she had to be carried out in a stretcher. Anyway, after I finished those 2 weeks of bullshit, I was finally able to work at the location near me. However, the manager then revealed to me she wanted me to do special cash register training over 50 miles away at some bullshit location I'd have to bus to at like 6 in the morning. So at this point I was like, are you fucking me right now? I am not doing that with a smile on my face. At that moment, I decided I was just gonna fuck with Starbucks because I was done with them, and I did this instead of just quitting because at least this way I'd make some income for fucking around on their dime. So the morning of reckoning came. I got up at like 5 in the morning to go bus down to this sketchy location all the way out in like Southwest Oregon. There was nobody on the bus except for me and this fucking pedophile, and I say that because he was like this weird 50-year-old bald dude wearing a trench coat who had a mustache who kept like giggling to himself. I don't know, it was really uncomfortable, and it was just me and him on the bus for the entire hour I was on there. So anyway, I finally get to this location. I'm sweating because of all the goddamn walking I had to do, and I'm there for training with like 4 other people who do not want to be there, and the lady training us was a fucking bitch, and if she's watching this, she knows who she is. She was like this 40-year-old, very clearly single lady who was super passive-aggressive and controlling. Keep in mind, me and all of the people at this training were well over 18, and she was acting like we were all 13 years old and trying to tell us what to do beyond what was appropriate. So I rebelled against her obvious power complex she had by doing things to annoy her on purpose. For example, at one point she was trying to demonstrate something I didn't care about at all, like I think it was about fucking candy sales or something, which had nothing to do with my job. So I started hitting on this small, like, foreign exchange 19-year-old girl student who was also training. I had no actual interest in her, I just knew it would annoy the shit out of that lady, which it very much so did. She was staring at me with like death eyes. The next thing I did was during the next demonstration, I pulled out a pen and a small pad of paper from my coat and started sketching Deadpool right in front of her, which she caught on to immediately and gave me a verbal warning. Everyone was fucking holding back laughter at this training except for her. So anyway, after a few hours of this tedious fucking garbage, she pulled me aside and said if I kept up this behavior, she was going to get me terminated. So I decided I was going to flex my rebellious muscles in front of her stupid bitch face once again. So I said in exact quotes, "Sorry for acting like a douchebag. I haven't had my caffeine today." Now this shocked her sensitive 40-year-old virgin ears. She could not believe I had the audacity to say a mild swear word in front of a grocery store manager. So she took me to HR, and I just gave a blasé explanation of what I did in exact words without even lying about it, and they just wrote me up. I went home and continued going to work after that incident. They didn't actually know what happened at my location. They didn't even talk to me about it for like a month and a half, and I earned a good $800 there before the manager of that location finally caught word of the horrible things I did. He brought me into his office and said, "Look, we're looking for workers who take things a little more seriously, so we're gonna have to let you go." He had a smug, like, businessman look on his face, as if he just totally overpowered me and owned me. But I metaphorically spit in his stupid face by saying, "Okay, bye," in a blasé way, and he looked so defeated. I very aggressively grabbed my final paycheck off his desk and left the office, leaving his door open as a final fuck you. That's my story of working at Starbucks. How's it going, guys? Cracked Rag here, and today I have one final story for you all in regards to me getting fired from a business. Now, when I released my last How I Got Fired video, which was about Burger King, I thought that would be the last one until I remembered I actually had one more job I could cover for this series. That's right, I've had so many fucking jobs in the last 4 years, I don't even remember some of them. This job in particular I got fired from after less than 2 days of working there. And see, Craigslist has like a now hiring section that showcases local posts from small businesses that are desperately seeking employment. Now, at the time, these posts should have been a huge red flag to me, considering just how desperate they were. They were practically begging you to let them hire you, which is just really sketchy and bizarre looking back. I would just really recommend avoiding the Craigslist jobs section. Nothing good comes from there, especially if you don't want to get raped, but that's a story for another time. Anyway, because of the immense pressure from my family to get another job ASAP, I looked past the sketchiness of these posts and found a job listing for a call center just out of town that was offering $17 an hour, and was actually offering up to like $25 an hour depending on how well you perform, which in my mind was fucking amazing compared to the 3 Sacagawea coins a month I got from Taco Bell. So I called them up, they answered, we talked for a few minutes, and before I knew it, I had an interview, lined up tomorrow night in fact. So, fast forward to the next day, I woke up at 6 a.m. to get ready for the interview, and a few minutes later I was outside waiting for the bus. The bus ride there was the first major red flag to me that this job was gonna suck balls. Why, you ask? Because it took like 3 fucking hours to get there. Even taking Uber there would have taken at least an hour and a half. I foolishly hadn't checked on Google Maps how far away this place was, and had just blindly set out on this 3-hour adventure. Though luckily I had arrived just in time, and when I eventually got there, I saw that there was also a few other people in suits waiting outside looking to interview. We eventually were greeted by this really overly energetic, overly excited man who introduced himself as the boss. At this point I was thinking, okay, I'm definitely gonna get raped in a minute, I just know it. But luckily, this man had good intentions, and he let us all into the interview room, which led to one of the most awkward interviews of my entire life. Why was it awkward? Because this fucking coked up Willy Wonka looking ass bitch boss was trying to pitch this job to us like it was gonna change our lives. This was the point I realized that I'm either getting raped in a minute or this job was going to be a gigantic scam. Luckily, I discovered that neither of those things were the case. But the reason this job was so desperate for employees and paid so well is because it was a fucking horrible job. So fast forward to my first day working there and I already fucking hate it with a passion. For one, I took an Uber to work on my first day to alleviate stress, but it didn't alleviate shit because it was still an hour and a half drive there, and my Uber driver was a fucking idiot who made me late on my first day because his dumbass decided he needed to go to Taco Bell and sit at the drive-thru for 30 minutes before picking me up. Anyway, upon getting there, I'm revealed the true nature of this job almost immediately. So get this, my job was to sell really expensive scam advertising space at a local golf course. And by the way I had to do this was by looking up a Yellow Page directory of every business local to me, before then spam calling the shit out of them a billion times until they answer, to which I then had to try and manipulate the business owner into purchasing ad space through really aggressive language. Now this may not sound like the hardest job ever, but it fucking is. There's nothing more exhausting than cold calling a bunch of random assholes who who are already in a bad mood and trying to sell them expensive shit, especially expensive shit at a golf course they've never fucking been to in their entire lives. And it's not like I could get away with just calling a few of these people in one day. There was a quota that required you call 250 people minimum a day, or else you'd get suspended pay. I was actually doing decently well the first day, or so I thought, when I made a gigantic sale of like $1,500 after calling up a local camera shop. The sale was so big, literally everyone in the office stood and clapped for me and congratulated me because it was so impressive. And the boss even approached me and told me I was a natural and that my work ethic was inspiring. Now, this sounds like a cringy fairy tale lie, right? Well, it won't when I finish the story. See, 30 minutes after I made that sale and felt all proud of myself, my boss announced that the person I called for the sale was actually trolling me and wasn't even the owner of the business I called. It was just some shitty asshole kid. Do you know how humiliating it is to get a standing ovation from like 50 people for something only to find out 30 minutes later it was all a goddamn hoax? The rest of that day, I just felt sick to my stomach and I was exhausted. When I got home, I didn't even want to move. The next and final day of work at this corporation was even worse somehow. I realized quickly that 99% of the people I'd call on a daily basis would pretty much tell me to go kill myself, and the 1% of people who were stupid enough to accept our offer were clearly mentally handicapped, so it didn't feel good whether you won or lost at this corporation. Also, this place was full of these weird, creepy old women flirts in their 40s and 50s who worked there, who would shamelessly just like start rubbing my shoulders and shit when I was calling these businesses, which is really uncomfortable. I know that sounds like some people's fantasy, but it's just extremely bizarre in real life. Anyway, after day 2 of working here, I realized quickly that if I kept working here, I would die of AIDS. Not literal AIDS, mental AIDS, which is even worse. So I decided that night I was gonna quit. Also, I didn't like the management. They were just weird as hell. They'd do this weird thing where they'd all gather around a computer close to me and start watching Mr. Beast videos out loud and talking about how jealous they were of YouTubers like PewDiePie for all the money they frequently make. It was just weird, especially because these were grown men in their 50s with families and shit. But anyway, that night when I got home, I decided I wasn't even going to give this business a 2-week notice, or even a notice at all. They didn't deserve it. They just sucked. I just stopped showing up starting the next day. I didn't say shit to anyone, and I got my paycheck in the mail a week later, which was actually pretty impressive. I'd only put in like 15 hours of work and my paycheck was $500, not including the tips I made. But to be fair, the amount of work you have to put in to get that much money was not worth it. So yeah, that's the story of how I got fired as a telemarketer. The moral of the story is never work at a call center and never work fast food. These two types of jobs go very hand in hand with how they operate, and it's just completely soul-sucking. If you're looking for a fulfilling dead-end job that you only will be needing temporarily, I'd really just recommend being a waiter at a nice restaurant or something. Anyway, that's all for today. See ya. Bonus story. You guys are really curious about how I got fired from Chipotle, and every single day I get literally dozens of messages and comments and emails asking me to elaborate on stupid fucking Chipotle. And let's just say it's a very quick story that I hardly even remember because it was so irrelevant, unfunny, uninteresting, and long ago. The reason I didn't make a video about Chipotle is I felt it just wasn't that interesting. Like, who cares? There's nothing to it. I essentially just started working at Chipotle in Portland when I was 18. They were desperately hiring, and I had just been fired from another job previously, so I applied, and I got the job within a few days. First off, let me just say, Chipotle is a pain in the ass to work at. It is easily one of the hardest places I worked out of the whole few. The hours are extremely long and demanding, the place is sweaty and stressful and loud and intense all day, but the worst offender has to be, it's like Subway on steroids. You remember how pissed off I was at the fact that I had to manually take out all those Subway trays and wash them and clean them? Yeah, you have to do that times 50 at Chipotle. Just look at this. It's just a nightmare of constant organization and slaving away when you're just about to pass out. Now, the manager and employees of this place also didn't like me because I was, in their eyes, like a spoiled American white child who knew nothing about anything. Meanwhile, nearly everyone who worked there was a traditional, authentic Mexican person over the age of 21 and spoke multiple languages. It was horrible working with them because they were all in their element and I was far from my element. They were all smarter than me about literally everything in the kitchen. They were faster than me. They worked effortlessly, whereas I was miserable and exhausted. They spoke and related to each other in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. It was fucking awful. At least at Taco Bell, there were a few other American dumb, retarded, white people like myself there, but I actually felt like I was in a different country when I worked at Chipotle, and I felt like an idiot. And they just didn't like me. A lot of the employees didn't even speak English at all, so they couldn't even talk to me whatsoever, and the boss thought I was a little bitch, and he didn't even want to lift my spirits at all. I had absolutely no fun or learning experiences from working at Chipotle, and the pay was also awful, so because of these things, I just stopped showing up, and eventually they lowered my hours until I was given a call that I was no longer needed. And yeah, that's it. That's all, everybody. That's my story. Thanks for watching.
McDonald's more than meets the eye.
How's it going, guys? Cracked Rack here, and I bet you haven't heard that in a long time. Today, I am back with another comedic rant video for you all. Now, a lot of people probably think I'm too narcissistic to even post a comedy video these days, but it's not true. I'm here, and I'm queer, and I'm not going away anytime soon, so please calm your ass right down. I don't like normally doing these because I like to make, better quality content or maybe even music and not just a lazy story told over some gameplay footage, but why not? Let's revisit the classics and give people a good show. Anyways, little boys and girls, today's story starts like any other. I was trying to get extra money for Deplorable Instincts about 3 years ago. You see, 3 years ago when I was just beginning the concept of my novel, Deplorable Instinct, I needed some cash. I only had like $200 to put towards the book, and you can't get anything with $200. You can maybe buy a candy bar and a Glock 15 to kill yourself. So I realized I just needed to get a quick job. However, at the time, I lived in an area where there weren't really any job opportunities, especially not for someone like myself. So the only place that was nearby was McDonald's. And I decided it'd be a good choice because it was $19 an hour now. So I was like, holy crap, yeah, and I applied. Though there was one major hiccup, and I do mean major. It was almost just vomit, actually. I had already worked at that McDonald's like 6 or 7 years ago, which you can go hear about yourself in another video. So I go there, and I apply, and I got an immediate interview, literally like 5 minutes after I applied. The same day, and I was like, holy shit, these people are fucking desperate. Not just because you have me as an employee, but because you're willing to sign me on within 5 fucking seconds of me finishing the application. But hey, I figured it wouldn't matter if I had worked at the McDonald's previously, because it had been so long since I worked there, their pay was like $12 an hour. So I figured it really just wouldn't matter. So anyway, I go to the interview, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's new people here, there's new everything, there's nothing to worry about. So immediately I sit there, I wait for my interviewer to come out, and immediately there's the same manager from years ago who fired me coming out to interview me. And she's dressed like Wario for some reason, there's like a Mario theme going on. So she sits me down, and she's really nice to me because I've successfully convinced her that I am a different man from who I was years ago. And she was just really excited to hire me, so I signed some paperwork, and the first day was the next day. Also, the decorations everywhere were so trashy. It was just like Mario Party games from like the early 2000s decorated all over the fucking McDonald's chairs. You had Mortal Kombat decorations. This was clearly a very trashy McDonald's that was not at all connected to like the actual franchise. It didn't really make any sense, though, because everyone who came to that McDonald's was just too old for this. The youngest people there, if they weren't actual, like, babies, were, like, 19 years old. So it would honestly just look like a stoner paradise more than an innocent, family-friendly one. Anyways, cut to my first day, and I already have a major issue. My old car that I was driving was a complete shitbox. It was an extremely old Chevrolet from the 1980s, and it had no features at all. It was really cold out when I was trying to get to work, and I was already really late, but I couldn't, and I was even later, because my windows were completely frosted over. And I scraped it for like 10 minutes, and it didn't matter. So because they were such a short distance away from the McDonald's, I decided I would just drive with my head stuck out the window, which I did. Which led me to yet another issue, as if I was the Three Stooges. My hat then flew off of my head and smacked the car behind me. and I was frankly just too embarrassed to even go get it, so I just continued to drive to work like I was in Mad Max. So anyways, I get to work, and every last single employee is like 13. Either they're 13, or they're like 99. There is no in between, and I feel awful and totally out of place as soon as my shift starts. Keep in mind, these were very hard times for me, and I was really in no position to even be working this way. So I start training, and it's so fucking boring. This man of maybe 25 years old, who looks like he's straight out of Family Guy, tries to teach me how to use the onions. And he's basically like, alright, so you're gonna put the onions on the burger, and you're just gonna go ahead and let that sit there for a while and simmer. I really was losing my mind and did not want to deal with any of this, especially with this fucking asshole. And I really just realized right here and then that I am not a normal blue-collar worker at all, and I suck at it! I don't have the mindset for it at all, and it just seems totally alien to me. So anyways, every last single coworker fucking hated my guts. They were all 13 years old, like I said, or really old people, and we had absolutely nothing in common, so I just felt like a big waste of space, and I didn't even really care about anything they had to say, and they didn't care about anything I had to say, so it was just fucking awful. Cut to day 2, and it fucking sucked. I wanted to die. I had a 10-hour shift at fucking McDonald's as Cracked Rack in a crowd of 13-year-olds. I felt absolutely terrible, and I just wanted to die. And I was really considering just using my $200 to fund my book and not keeping this piece of shit job. I know that sounds very entitled, but holy fuck, I felt like I was in the ninth circle of hell. So anyways, I decided that because my shift was so long and so boring that I'd get a little high during my shift. That way I could keep my distance from, you know, all of the idiots. Because those people are the idiots. I'm not the idiot. I'm not dumb. They're dumb. Now, keep in mind, this was 3 years ago. I would not do this now. But at the time, I was very, very bored and in a bad place, so I just wanted to get high whenever I could. And, you know, that way, if I was really high, I could just keep my distance from the 13-year-olds and the hospice patients and do my own thing. Luckily, I had half a joint with me. And I went out to my car to smoke it, while also smoking a cigarette as to taint the air with cigarette smoke and not weed smoke. Mind you, I wasn't on break or anything, I was supposed to be working, and I was focusing much more on hotboxing my car than working. In that hotboxing session, I got really high. I literally felt like a fucking ghost. And when I went back into the McDonald's, I actually started to kind of have fun for a minute. I felt like I was doing a good job and felt excellent, even though I was doing an absolutely unacceptable job. And this one girl in particular absolutely fucking hated me. She wanted me to die. She was not a kid. She was like 30 years old, but she looked like she was 12 for some reason. Really, she did not look like an adult at all. And she always looked at me with just disgust on her face. Just bleh! And when she saw me as I came back in from smoking weed, she just gave me the most disgusted look I've ever seen anyone give. Like, not to be super supremely offensive, but she had a more disgusted look on her face than Anne Frank would have for Hitler if she got one last glance at him while he was alive. Anyways, this woman's negativity really ruined my vibe, because she wasn't just some kid, she was like an adult, and the manager actually got involved and was like, "Hey, Matthew!" And I just instantly sobered right up, and that pissed me off, and I just felt like a big piece of shit. It was at this moment I realized I probably shouldn't be working at McDonald's. Cut to day 3, and the most embarrassing incident ever happens. You see, I was having a very bad time at this time. These were not fun times for Cracked Rack. I was facing 2 lawsuits I had no preparation to even fight. One for a bunch of absolute lunatics that were just being insane, and the second one was for some Karen that was trying to sue me. Luckily, neither of them came out to be anything, but still, at the time, I was very scared of these 2 lawsuits. I was dealing with extreme drama, especially friend drama, and I was also dealing with writing a book, and I also got signed to a record label, a very small one, but I did get signed, and I was like coming to terms with that, And it was just a lot of shit. So I felt like utter shit and was just in a constant state of fight or flight mode. I was definitely not fit to be working at this McDonald's, or any McDonald's for that matter. And on top of this, to make matters significantly worse, I just kept getting phone calls from the courthouse about my cases over and over again, which felt absolutely fucking awful. I literally just wanted to die. So I started to have a panic attack that was really bad, and I needed desperately to breathe deeply as to calm myself down. So, standing in the middle of the kitchen, I closed my eyes and took a deep, loud breath as to calm myself. Because, you know, no one was around me. I needed to calm down. So basically I went, and as I did so, I smelled a huge, hint of cocoa butter. And it was so strong, I literally just instantly went, smells like cocoa butter. And I opened my eyes, only to then see an elderly woman directly in front of me bending over to put something down, and to my right is that disgusted girl from earlier staring at me, way more disgusted than before. Now, I brushed this off as nothing, but then day 4 came and shit hit the fucking fan. I was eating a McCrispy on my table, and the manager approaches me and goes, "Matthew, did you inappropriately sniff an employee?" And I, of course, was like, no, I didn't. And at this point, I stopped taking the job seriously because I knew my days were numbered anyways, and I was not capable of even doing this fucking work. And they already hated my guts, and I was already gonna quit. So I was like, alright, fuck it, I'm just gonna stop giving a shit. And I decided to respond to his accusation with a little meme. So I said, "Sorry, I can be kind of autistic sometimes." Which wasn't even a lie, really, and I expected him to laugh, but he didn't. He stared at me with disgust and silence for seconds longer. Frankly, I could not believe I had gotten myself into a situation like this. At my age? At my fucking age? Not helping my case was this 18-year-old child, basically, who wouldn't stop talking about all the hardcore fucking she does. Like, she had literally just turned 18, a week prior, and she wouldn't stop talking about all the sloppy, slutty, fucking premarital sex she was having. On top of this, she was also fucking engaged. So I just thought she was an absolute lunatic. I'd be doing the dishes and I'd overhear her talking to an uninterested or even underage coworker being like, "Yeah, I met this guy at a mall, and we went, and I sucked his cock. Ha ha. My boyfriend was like, what the fuck? It was so fucking #hot. And I was just like, ew! And you couldn't escape it. She'd go up to everyone and be like, "Yep, I had sex with this man in his camper van, even though I'm engaged. He was so fucking hot. Oh my god." So anyways, cut to day 5, and I am literally having a panic attack over the onions. I can't even properly put the onions on a burger because I'm having such anxiety over several issues. And my coworkers notice.
Is this too hard for you?
The Family Guy-looking dude said condescendingly. Yeah, this day was awful. I kept fucking everything up. You know the wastebaskets at McDonald's of wasted food they couldn't cook, or they fucked it up somehow? Yeah, well I filled that motherfucker up to the brim with oniony shit burgers, like $50 a burgers. And that 30-year-old woman who hates my guts was like, "What the fuck? That was like a day's worth of shit!" And I was like, because I was just having a huge panic attack. And yeah, it was just an absolute disaster. However, the disaster came to a fucking climax, which was day 6, the last day. Basically, I came into work. My boss, the woman, sits me down and she's like, "Hey Matthew, we've been getting some complaints about, your work ability the last several days. Are you sure this is going to be a job you can handle?" And I was like, of course I can handle it. But as soon as I said that, I got another phone call, and I answered it immediately because it was the police. I was getting a call from a police officer about something relating to my lawsuit. And I was like, "Oh, sorry, can you excuse me for a minute? I have to talk to the police." So I went outside and I talked to the police for a while, and after that it was over. I came back inside and I was just kind of shaken up for having to talk to the police, and I just couldn't do my job at all. So I came over to her and I was like, "Hey boss, I wanted to tell you something. I'm gonna be..." And as soon as I said I was gonna be quitting, she announced that I was actually terminated after the 2-week probationary period. And yeah, I basically just went home and did the same thing I always do. Now you're probably asking yourself, did I learn anything from this? No! How's it going, guys? Correct Rag here. It's been a while since I've posted. I hope you enjoyed my song cover a couple days ago where I was talking about fapping to cartoons, anime particularly. Today, we're going to talk about how I got fired from Town Pump. Now, if you don't know what Town Pump is, it's like a Montana, Alaska-based gas station. Now, I haven't made a how I got fired in a while, and that's because I want it to be a special, delicious, tasty treat, okay? I want it to be like that day-old donut at the gas station, speaking of which. Or maybe I want it to be like that little bit of frickin' heroin in that syringe. I just want you to sit down, relax, and focus on nothing but me getting fired. Okay, where does the story start? Well, it starts like always. I was trying to fund my book. And the only way I knew how was a job. Now, me looking the way I do, and acting the way I do, and having the attitude that I do, I found it a little difficult to get a job. I'd go in there, like Olive Garden, I'd be like, hello. And they'd be like, do I know you? Do you have any references? And I'd be like, no. And they'd be like, why do you have David Bowie tattooed on your hand? Are you a fan? And I'd be like, no. She'd be like, are you willing to do full time? And I'd be like, no. She'd be like, can I call you Matthew instead of Matt? And I'd be like, no! So things got a little difficult for a while, until eventually I found Town Pump. Town Pump is absolutely amazing because they're like, hi there, you need a job? Well, you don't need no qualifications or you don't need no clean criminal history. You can come in with a face tattoo of a butthole. We don't give a fuck. Just sit here with these chicken nuggets and these temperatures, and you're gonna take the temperature and sell the chicken nuggets. Or you're fired, motherfucker! And that's pretty much Town Pump. So I get a job there, and there's a really nice manager there. I think his name's Jeff. Really great guy. I am so sorry, Jeff, that I was assigned to you. Then, there was like this really hot chick. There was a huge problem with that, though. We'll get back to that. And then there were a couple of other dudes who worked there, and they were totally random. I couldn't even pick them out of a crowd. I don't even remember. And then there was the janitor, who was my manager. And I'm not going to say his name, because I'm going to be talking some shit. So anyways, as I worked here, things were great the first couple days. I got everything right. I got everything correct. And then, they made me work with this... She quit like a day later, but she was this goth chick who looked like she was in a movie where she was like getting bullied for being goth, like a goth vampire. And she had bad hygiene, and she smelled like shit. I don't think she would even give a fuck that I was saying this, because she was insane. And she was like Russian, so she was like, hello. And it was just weird as shit. So we're stocking some fucking Doritos and some popcorn chips and all that stuff. And she's giving me these instructions. She's like, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, what? So I put, I improvise. I put things where I think they go. And then I get in trouble. They're like, that's not where this goes. We told you. We fucking told you. We fucking told you, Matthew! And I thought that was stupid. And I knew immediately that this job was gonna suck dick. And even the manager would agree. He would be like, yeah, your job sucks dick, son. So then, I meet this employee. I don't remember what his name was. We'll call him Nicholas. And Nicholas was like 30 years old. He kind of looked like a 14-year-old, though, which was kind of cool. It's like, how does that even fucking happen? He was a super cool dude, had a wife and kids and everything, but he had stomach issues. So he'd come into work and he'd be like, and I felt really bad for him, right? So I was like, you gotta drink some pickle juice. So pickle juice is gonna reboot the system. It's gonna make you feel better. And he knew about it. He's like, oh yeah, I know about pickle juice. Can you get me some? I haven't tried that in a while. I was like, yeah. So I go proudly like I'm a war veteran, or like I just got deployed home or sent home from Iraq. And I get some pickle juice, and I go back into the deli room, and I give it to him. He takes a drink with a proud smile on my face. He's like, oh, my stomach feels worse. And it just kind of stayed that way all day. And, I also got in trouble because I kept bringing my own food from home and putting it in the deep fryer. So there was one moment where the boss was like, all right, we got some expensive oil here. Everyone be careful with it. And then I didn't know it was wrong to then, like, open up some chicken pot pie or some burritos and put it in there and deep fry it using the company fryer. I remember at one point I was just like, yeah, I had like a chicken fucking pot pie in there and like 2 burritos. All the crumbs and debris from it is going into the oil floating around in it. And I'm just swirling it around like, fuck yeah, this is awesome as fuck. And the manager, Jeff, comes around and is pretty much like, what the fuck are you doing? And I was like, I'm using the deep fryer as intended, brother. And it wasn't intended for that. You only can put regular shit from the store in there because anything else, the whole oil has to be drained, and it's like $100 a waste. So I wasted like $100, and yeah. Then this gay man, this really nice gay man, I was like, man, I don't have $20 to go buy an eighth of weed. And he was like, you could have a $20 bill to go buy an eighth of weed. I was like, thanks, gay man. I mean, I didn't say that, but I might as well. I was like, thanks, gay man. And I was like, when do I repay you? And he's like, oh, my boy, you don't need to repay me. There was one moment where there was this really hot chick came in. Like, her tits were pressed together and pushed up, and it looked really nice. And I think she might have been a prostitute, but whatever. And she came over to where I was at the self-checkout stand, I think intentionally. She might have been hoping I talked to her. And I didn't! I just got too nervous, and, her tits were out, they're flapping around pretty much, and it just freaked me out, you know what I'm saying? Because, like, I'm not trying to bathe in your vaginal juicing. Like, if you're gonna be that much of a fucking whore, like, I don't want it, I'm sorry. I don't. I prefer a cleaner woman. Like, I guess you can say I have kind of an Adolf Hitler standard. And speaking of Adolf Hitler, there was then a sexual moment. You see, there was this coworker who was really attractive, really clean cut, and she was like dark-haired brunette. She kind of looked like a female version of me, and that kind of was like cool, like we could have been twins. However, I got scared to show interest in her as well because she was just like too like clingy and serious. Like it was not. Like, I don't want anything serious with anybody. I just want casual everything. But I haven't really had too much luck with that. Because I'm too busy writing my novels about school shooters going on a massacre. So there I was, contemplating, I can't date this girl because I gotta write my school shooter books. But then, a coworker came up to me, and she was like, she's 16, right? And I was like, what?! So I clicked the reset button in my mind, got rid of the memory of my feelings for her, and I replaced it with a toddler. And don't worry, I don't want to do anything to a toddler. So anyways, after that nightmare, then I had to work with the janitor. The janitor was serious fucking business. He took it so fucking seriously. He came to work in a badass vest. He walked like he was a goddamn sheriff. And he was pretty much my personal trainer manager. And we had to go around the whole gas station, change all of the trash, clean all of the gas pumps. It was a pain in the fucking dick. And the whole time, Bill was just driving his UTV in between the island, each row, and being like, "You're trash! You're fucking trash, Matthew! Yeah, haha! You're trash, son!" And then he opened up a filthy trash can with all sorts of shit, probably even real feces on it. And he was like, "Get scrubbing! This is your future now, boy!" And so I got scrubbing. And, I did a shitty job at it. But I was able to manipulate the janitor into thinking I did a good job at it. But it didn't last for long. One thing that was really weird about the janitor, and I don't think this is gossip or bullying or whatever, he was so goddamn unhealthy. I don't mean he was fat, because he really wasn't. He actually looked okay for his age. He was physically and mentally the most unhealthy man I think I've ever seen in my life. Physically, he had his 3 meals at Town Pump, all 3 of them, and he would just eat corn dog, chicken nuggets, burritos, and taquitos, and frozen pizzas and shit, and that would be his whole cuisine for the whole day. And he would also drink a shit ton of Mountain Dew and grape soda, and no water. He also would do chewing tobacco on top of that, and I believe other stuff as well.
And he was just so goddamn unhealthy. Then, and it doesn't matter, but then while doing that stuff, he would be like, yeah, I ain't visited a doctor in about 40 years, and I'm fine. And there's just cavities all over his teeth. I was like, Jesus Christ, dude, you gotta go to the doctor. And he was like, you really think I gotta go to the doctor? And I'm like, yes! You do nothing but eat red fucking meat and drink Mountain Dew and sit on this UTV, yes! I don't think you're gonna be alive in 10 years. And then he was like, I don't even brush my teeth at night. And I'm like, dude, holy fuck. Holy titty fucking Christ. For mentally, he was also very messed up because he was just so aggressive. We'd be driving around the islands and he'd be like, fucking customers, leaving trash behind, bunch of pieces of worthless fucking shit. And he'd see me doing like a bare minimum job. He'd be like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Not enough kids doing enough hard work. Yeah! And my least favorite was when he would tell me the stories of all the people he tortured Jigsaw style. He'd be like, oh yeah, this meth head motherfucker came onto my property and stole like a $20 bottle of bleach that was sitting out. And I put a gun between his fucking eyes! And I said, beg for your life! And he started crying. This wasn't a story he told once, he told it like 5 times! And then I was like, hey, you ever watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? He was like, oh, that there is the devil's work, and its creators can go to hell! And then the final incident. So basically, I used to have this horrible habit of at work, I would make extremely inappropriate jokes. Now, I still kind of do this, but I don't like swear or say anything offensive or violent or abusive. And that's not what happened here. I said something violent, offensive, and abusive to a child. So basically, there was this kid that worked there. He was 15. Now hold on, it's not going where you think it's going. And I heard him talking really loudly about how he likes Family Guy. Now he's watching Family Guy. And he was talking about all this other offensive media. And he was also talking about How to Basic, which is really super irrelevant, but I figured if he liked that stuff, then he liked all sorts of obscure offensive shit. So I was like, oh, he loves offensive media. I'm gonna try to make an offensive joke. Just one. So I went up to him. I shouldn't have done it when he was alone. I was not thinking about how bad this was. And I was like, imagine me and the gay boss, because there was a gay boss. I said, kid, imagine me and the gay boss walking in the room, butt naked, holding hands. He was like, huh? And I was like, and we make out, and then I get on top of him like a circus act, do a fucking backflip, pull out an AR-15, and start shooting up the entire building. And I didn't even say it that aggressively. This is such a retarded thing to say. Nobody in the world would say that and mean it. Like, okay, if you want to call me cringe for saying that, fine. It was pretty fucking cringe. I don't think I deserved a punishment like I just raped a child. But I guess he was a lot younger than I thought. And that's an issue I've had with minors in the past. Not like that. Just that I'll see like a 16-year-old and assume that they're like 18. And I'll be like, are you 18? You want to smoke a cigarette? Something like that. Or maybe I'll be like, are you 18? Can I tell you this joke? And never am I like, are you 18? Want to fuck? I'm not a creep. But this kid, on the other hand, acted like I was the sole originator, director of the Columbine basement tapes. He went straight to the management, and the manager was like, Matthew, we need to have a talk. I was like, oh fuck, is it the Russian bitch stalking wrong? Is it the deep fryer? Tell me, what's wrong? And he was like, did you make a joke to Jimmy just a couple minutes ago? I was like, oh yeah, I told him just an absolutely stupid, retarded joke. He was like, okay, well, that wasn't an appropriate thing to say at work. And inside I was kicking myself, because I'm like, God, I fucking hate appropriateness, it's so gay! I want to be an autistic retard as much as I want! But alas, the world's not about me, and this is just another lesson showing that. So, what did we learn? Town Pump is great. Deep fryers are not for your own food. Always make sure girls are over 18. And don't tell little kids that you're gonna commit a naked terrorist attack. How did I get fired? I didn't get fired, I quit. But I'm just like the others, I might as well have been fired, and I was probably about one referral away from firing.
How's it going, guys? Cracked Rack here, and today I wanted to talk about how I got fired from an insane asylum. Yes, you heard that right. I was recently, like maybe 2 months ago, fired from a mental institution that I worked at. So basically, I desperately needed a job, and not just to pay rent, but to fund my content at the same time. I consider my content a big part of my life, and a part of me, and I just needed money because I wanted to grow. On top of this, I have always been big on mental health and psychology and psychological dynamics, so I wanted to enhance my skills and get a resume for mental health work. So I was shopping around for a job, and someone I know was like, hey, I got a reference. You can actually just work here. I was like, really? Like, normally the application's like 200 pages long, but because this person had connections, they were like, you can come right in. I was like, yes! Oh, fuck! Some Native Americans just bashed in a car window and stole everything. Sorry about that, guys. While this was a mental asylum, it wasn't the kind that I wanted. I wanted the kind where I could observe the patients and, non-physical stuff. That's not what this was, and that's where everything went wrong. So basically, this asylum was like where severely disabled people... Really, Cat? This asylum is where severely disabled people would live in, and it was like a row of apartments... Oh, the interruptions today. It was a row of apartments, but they were all together, and it was an asylum. These people were all autistic to the point where they can't speak at all, or schizophrenic, where you're literally seeing shit that's not there and being afraid of it. I wanted this job because it gives you hours of free time, and I figured I could bring my computer, write my books, content scripts, use what was going on around me as inspiration, stuff like that, while getting paid. So I get the job really easily through a reference. Like, seriously, most people would have to kill for this job. I just got it like that, and I messed it up in, like, a couple of days. And it's a very important position. Very, very important position. Well, after one interview, they hired me. I guess they saw me and were like, boom, our perfect, most reliable employee right here. And I was like, yes! However, this job would quickly unveil itself to be quite a nasty chore. So the first issue is it was like 35 fucking minutes away. I had to drive on the freeway for like 15 minutes just to get there at night. So, night one of trying to get there, I missed a freeway exit. I was like, fuck! So I decided to, in the snow, turn around and drive across the grassy median to go the other way. Because otherwise it was going to take like an hour to drive to the correct exit. However, upon doing this, all of a sudden my car stuck in the median. The tires were caught in the snow and wouldn't move, and I was like, fuck! 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 So I called 911, and while calling them, I have no idea how I did it. I got the car out of the ditch and safely on the other way, under the road. And I hung up. So I get to work, but I'm like 45 minutes late. She introduces me to the patients, and my patients were, and I'm not breaking HIPAA by telling you this, my patients were 3 men in their 40s who were severely disabled. One of the men liked to walk around in his underwear at 45 years old and destroy the house, just smash glass, fucking punch holes through the walls. Insanity. Literally, and that's why he was there. I respected him the most out of all of the patients. Not that I didn't respect any of them, but you get my point. I also had a coworker who was nice, but she was also kind of weird because she kept being like, oh yeah, I used to smoke a bunch of crystal meth. I used to inject heroin every day, every 5 minutes. I've even done crocodile before, and I was like, okay. She just wouldn't stop talking about it. She's like, yeah, smoked meth, did some LSD. Me and my husband would have a bunch of sex on it. But I had to stop because it made me homeless. I was like, damn, that's rough. She's like, yeah, I smoked a lot of meth and heroin in my day. So, yeah, I'm doing this job and everything is fine at first. I'm like, yes, I found my place. Found it. And I felt really empathetic towards all of the clients until a manager pulled me aside and was like, okay, are you ready for the lube? And I was like, excuse me? And the manager goes, Yes, you see, that guy doesn't ever shower, so he has fungal infections on the tip of his penis, and we need you to take this petroleum jelly, lubricant, and rub it on the tip of his penis with your fingers, with his foreskin retracted. And I was like, what the fuck? So at this point, I knew this job was not for me. There's no way in hell I was going to rub jelly on a dude's fungus-infected cock every day as part of my schedule. So I didn't do it and pretended I did. Pretty much just farming the job for as much money as it'll give me. And the next day I'm here, and I knew this wasn't going to last long, so I'm not cut out for this disgusting work. I wanted to observe patients. I didn't want to actually physically clean them up. I wanted to be like a shadow of a psychologist so I could amateurly get some secondhand information for my content. I didn't think I'd have to perform fungal hand jobs on the clients. So this day, I let one of the disabled men play on my phone. They're not allowed phone access at all usually, other than what you give them. So this would be like a magical treat. And that it was. He gets the phone, and after 5 minutes of letting him choose whatever he wants on YouTube, all of a sudden I hear, "I can't tell you what it really is, I can only tell you what it feels like." Yeah, somehow he chose Eminem's song, and I was like, interesting. And he loved it. It was like a fucking 5-year-old on Christmas Day. He was dancing and prancing around like a happy 5-year-old as Eminem was like, "Fucking shit, you fucking bitch." It was very weird to watch, but also really wholesome. So I was like, you know what? Come here. And we sat on the couch, and we listened to Eminem for like 4 hours. I showed him Music to Be Murdered By, the Marshall Mathers LP. We listened to the whole thing, and he loved it. He was having so much fun. We listened to The Way I Am, Not Afraid, Insane off of Relapse, Beautiful. We listened to his Godzilla music video. I don't even really like a lot of these songs that much, but I did like them when they were being consumed by a mentally ill patient who has never seen anything like this before. So that was really cool. I feel like that's a magical moment in that guy's life. He'll remember that forever. But I thought this patient really liked me since he seemed to be enjoying the videos so much. He was smiling, he was laughing, but out of nowhere, he ripped open the front door of the house and was like, "Get out! Get out!" And I was like, ah. He was like 6'4". I wasn't going to argue with him. So I left and I went home, which I was allowed to do. Next day, I go to work again, and the manager's like, "Wait a minute, do you have CPR certification?" I was like, "No, not at all." And she was red as a tomato in her face. And she was like, "These patients have heart issues and frequently turn over and just die. You're the only one on duty. We can't have you as the only caretaker without this training." And I was like, oh, yeah, that's true, isn't it? You can't just have a guy with no experience or training monitoring the whole asylum just listening to Eminem. So she set up a meeting the next day for me to get CPR certification. However, I got so enthralled in Grand Theft Auto 4 that night and smoking weed that I stayed up until 6 in the morning. It was not even able to stay awake during the CPR meeting. And on top of that, my roommate needed the car, so I had to leave because we share the car. So I had to leave in the middle of the CPR class. The next day I went into work and the manager was like, "We got to invest in our employees, and from what I'm seeing, there's nothing to invest in." And I was like, "Can I go back to work?" She was like, "No." So I was like, "Fuck!" I literally said that, and I stormed out of the building, was not invited back, and I got my check in the mail, which I think means they were too scared to have me come back. And there you go. One last thing that happened that I think is interesting is I went into one of the women's homes by myself, and we were just having a nice conversation, and everything was really nice. And she was giving me all these complaints. She's like, "This employee did this to me," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." And all of a sudden, the door was like a really aggressive knock. So I open it, and she's like, "Get the fuck out of there. Do you have any idea who that is?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "Every last man that comes into her place alone gets accused of rape." And I was like, oh my god, she was literally just telling me all these stories of how these people did these things to her. I'm next. And as I walked away, I looked behind me, and I saw her staring out of her apartment window at me, silently. It was very creepy. But yeah, that's all. Hope you guys enjoyed this very disturbing episode of How I Got Fired. The series still continues. I think this is a series that's going to continue for life. So it's going to have many, many episodes. I don't think anything like this exists at all, so enjoy it.
How's it going, guys? Cracked Rack here with a fancy upgraded microphone. So I was going through my How I Got Fired playlist because I'm making a full, a new compilation movie of it that I want to try to maybe get on some streaming services because I think it's funny. And I realized I never made how I got fired from the car dealership. I must have blacked it out. What happened was, I want to say about 2 years ago now, I was living in a bad situation because I couldn't keep a job and I had all this roommate trouble, which I've had a couple times in my life. And so there was a lot of problems. And so I got this job desperately at a car dealership, a Kia dealership, and it went terribly wrong. So for some reason, the job immediately hired me. I went there and I got interviewed by a man who looked like Key from Key and Peele. And he pretty much was like, "Hello, I'm the car dealer manager of this place." Pretty much he was like, "What are your qualifications?" I was like, "None." He's like, "Do you have a driver's license?" I'm like, "Yes, from 10 years ago." He was like, "All right, cool, you are hired." My first thought was when I saw these computers empty, I was like, "Oh, I can write deplorable instinct, I have time," and they'll just think I'm doing work. Now, I didn't understand how these jobs worked. I didn't understand that, like, you had to literally sell cars 24/7 and it's on your own accord. You have to control the whole thing. I thought that, like, maybe I'd be on a wage or maybe I'd get to it after like a week or two. I didn't know that I was expected to start selling cars immediately. I thought they'd have some mercy on me. They did not, and they were expecting me to sell some cars right now. So keep that in mind. I was supposed to be selling cars during this whole story, but I didn't know that. So day one, they're like, "You can test drive any of the cars you want." And I was like, "Oh." So the first thing I did was I got into a Kia Soul, and I was like, "Yes!" Because I'd always wanted to test drive a Kia Soul. They look ridiculous. They look like smart cars, but like slightly bigger. They're just ridiculous. So I got inside of it. I was like, "Yes!" And I just totally got lost into this world of cars. Now, at the time, I was dealing with like some issues. I had like some trauma, unresolved trauma issues, and I was medicating for that. So I was smoking so much marijuana every day, but I couldn't do that at work. So I was thinking in my head while I was in this Kia Soul, I was like, I need to get kind of high. I can't just be sober all day. So I came to the realization that I needed some kratom. You know what kratom is? It's like a heroin, like a 10th as strong as heroin, like supplement that like recreates it. I was like, I need some of that. So I started calling all the local dispensaries like, "Hey, can I have some kratom for free?" Because I didn't have any money. So I was like, "Can I have some kratom for free?" And one store I called and they were like, "Yes." So I was like, "Yes," but there was a problem. It was all the way down in the city, like way by like Moss Mansion. It was right there. And that's a 45-minute away drive. That is a very long drive. When I am expected to be at work right now at the location selling cars, like maybe 2 of them already. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna do this. So I made it seem like to my boss I was just really studying the car. I was like, I am studying this car so hard right now, and I literally I'm studying everything about it. So then when I was gone for a while, he'd be like, "Oh, he's just learning." However, later I would learn that's not how they reacted. They just immediately knew that I had pretty much stolen the car. So anyways, I drove 40 minutes down to this dispensary. It was all the way on the butt end of town from where I was, and literally, it was this amazing dispensary I'd never even seen before. And I was like, "Can I have my kratom now?" And they're like, "Yes, we saved it just for you." And they put like 5 tablets in my hand. And I was like, "Yes!" And so I took 4 of them. And you'll see how much of a mistake that was. Right after I took it, he was like, "Whoa, you shouldn't have taken that, bro. Those are really strong tablets each. I gave you that so it would last a while." So I was like, "Oh, thanks." And I just awkwardly walked to the building, got into my car, turned it back on, and I felt good. I actually felt good. I felt like I had just IV'd some heroin into my veins pretty much. And I was ready to go sell some cars. But as I'm driving, I'm like, even thinking about it's making me want to throw up. I felt really nauseous. And not just nauseous, I felt like this pleasant and fun, like, weight on my body. Like a silly elephant was sitting on me or something. It's hard to explain. Anyways, I felt a mixture of, like, really good and really bad. But the really good was just making me ignore the bad. So I got really high and I kind of forgot all about work. I saw the library and I was like, "Ooh, I don't go to this one often." And I turned into it. It's a company car, by the way. And I go inside and there's this she's like a really nerdy chick, but she's kind of attractive. And I picked up one of the DVDs that was on like the rack. Someone had just returned it and she was going to put them away. And one of them was Saw. And I picked it up and I was like, "Cool." And she was pretty much like, "Oh, I love those movies." And it literally was like love at first sight. I wanted to marry her. I wanted to fuck her. I wanted to have children with her. But I was way too anxious about the work that I was doing and having to deal with work while high and being extremely high on these fucked up drugs to care. So I kind of just moved on. I went upstairs and I started reading this book. I think that it was a comic book. I literally don't even remember. It was like V for Vendetta or something. And suddenly I was reading this page, and I had completely forgotten about work at this point. I just saw everything go back and stretch until my room was like a hallway, and everything was like a narrow hallway, and that's how I felt. I was like, oh! And I started kind of falling asleep on the beanbag for a minute. However, a security guard immediately came over to me and was like, "Psst, hey, sir, are you okay?" And I remember I replied to him. I was so messed up, I went, ugh, and there was like a drool, like slobber coming out of my mouth. And he didn't care at all. He was like, "You need to get out of here." So I was like, okay, fine. And he could tell I was on drugs, obviously. He probably thought I was on actual heroin. So pretty much, I got up, I left the building, that cute chick wasn't there anymore. I got into the car, and all of a sudden my boss was like, "Bzz." And I was like, oh, fuck, what? And I open it, he's like, "Where are you?" I was like, "At the library." He's like, "Why are you at the library?" I was like, "Well, I'm studying these cars." And he's like, "Whatever, can you just come back?" And at this point, I think he's fired me in his head already. I was okay with, because I didn't want this job. I was just doing it to impress my parents, pretty much. So I get back there, and I'm ready to do some work. I'm like, yeah, do some work. And I can't believe that I drove, 40 minutes high out of my mind on opioids, pretty much. That's what I might as well have been taking. So for some reason, my boss isn't even mildly offended at what I've done. He doesn't even care, bring it up. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I go back to my chair, and I'm like, oh, I literally had my head tilted backwards with my mouth open like a heroin overdose. That's what I looked like, and that's how I felt. I felt immobile. I was like, oh, and I was drooling, and I felt absolutely awful. And the boss was like, what the fuck? And he kept coming back there and being like, are you okay? And he'd see me conked out, and I'd shoot back to consciousness, and I'd be like, oh, yes, I was just selling cars. Nothing to see here. And he was like, oh, very good, very good. And he went back to his office. Then he came back 5 minutes later. I'm conked out again. He was like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, geez, was I doing that? Oh, gosh, I just got really tired, sorry. And then he came back a third time, and I was straight up passed out sleeping on my keyboard. And he woke me up, and he was like, hey, you need to go home. And I was like, oh, shit, I'm caught. So I go home. Everything's fine. The next day, I go there, and I have the worst incident that I've had thus far. I pretty much committed Grand Theft Kia. One positive, they liked my videos. They followed my videos because I shared it with them, and they were like cool, and they thought it was cool. So that was really fun. However, they actually asked me, they were like, you should make like a funny video about Kia or something like that. And I was like, no, I'm gonna make a serious commercial for you guys. That's what I'm gonna do. So, using my real camera that I brought from home, my DSLR, I made a commercial with, I think it was, I don't even want to know. It's like the Kia Sportage or something, a $30,000 car. And I made a commercial with it that I thought was so cool back then. I was like, I am so cool. Looking back, it looks like garbage, and the commercial's a joke. I couldn't even find it. I could literally only find a little snippet of it, and it looks like crap.
And don't forget to turn your car into sport performance mode. You go so fast for an SUV, it's scary. Whoa, that was way too scary. So all in all, the Kia Telluride is the greatest.
And they acted like they loved it, and I was like so proud of it, but looking back, I don't think they loved it. I think they were just trying to be nice, or they thought it was funny and weird, because I think it is kind of funny. I did not intend for it to be funny. Anyways, this is where things get dark, because yes, things got very dark. So basically, one of these nights, I was like, man, I hate this job, because I hadn't sold a single car, because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what to do. I'd get to the paperwork and they'd be like, okay, what's your APR 5678 title registration? This is all easy stuff now, but back then they were like, oh, title registration, oh, this. I was like, what? And they were like, oh, taxes, tax form, credit check, credit loan. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And this night I just decided I don't care anymore. I think I'm gonna get fired anyways. I might as well just have fun with the last couple days of the job, if I could even get that far. And it ended up being my last day. So I took one of the Kia shit boxes. It's a shit box that when you press it, it goes bah, bah, like really loud roaring as you drive. Like it sounded horrible. And I regret this now, but I was like, I'm gonna be kind of a nuisance for a minute, because I thought it was just ridiculous that if I press the accelerator, it goes. So pretty much I started just driving really hard around things that you wouldn't suspect. There was literally like a protest going on, like a little protest for some Native American thing, and I drove by going looking at them. Then I saw a little girl eating her ice cream cone, so I went just drove by as fast as I could. And then finally I saw this like entrance to a suburb area that had like this huge block of houses and it was closed off at the end. And I was like, ooh. And I drove in it as fast as I could. So I'm just driving by these houses. Started at 25 miles an hour. Then I was like, you know, I bet I can increase it. Went to 30. And keep in mind, there is like a dead end at the end. So I knew I was going to turn around. So I was like 30, 40. And I started going faster and faster until I was like, okay, I'm very close to the end here. I can just turn around. So I can just speed really quick. I don't know what kind of logic that was. So I went at like 55 miles an hour. And it was so loud. It literally had to have just gotten the whole block's attention. And then at the end, there was this scary dude. I want to say 6'4" or 5. Huge muscles, like almost like a cartoon villain. And he's scary, and he's standing in a vest, and he's looking at me. And he looks like he's about to kill me. He was like, I rolled my window down to hear him out, and he was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And I wasn't scared. I'm so used to adults trying to intimidate me this way. So I was literally just like, oh no, I acted like I was scared. And pretty much, because I mean, I know, what are the chances he's going to come over to my little Kia Rio, pull me out of the window and kill me? Very unlikely. So I was like, sir, I am so sorry for what happened. And I was being totally manipulative because I wasn't sorry. I was insane. And I just wanted to go around his neighborhood at 50 miles an hour without a problem. And he wasn't having it. He was like, I cannot believe you would do that. There are cats running around here and dogs running around here. And he's right. I didn't think about that. It was clear when I did it. But I was like, shit, you're right. So I was like, you know, sir, you're right. There's cats, there's dogs, there's little kids. I shouldn't have been speeding through it like a bullet at 50 miles an hour. And this just made him angrier. He was like, oh, I'll kill you, pretty much. And he was saying that to me, but he wasn't doing anything physically scary. So I was like, oh, no. But I didn't want to start a fight because I would be in the wrong probably. So I was pretty much like, oh, yes, sir, I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. I don't even know why I did that. I did know why I did it. It was an unhealthy urge is what it was. And so he said it to me again. He was like, do it again and I'll kill you. And I'm not joking. So as I rolled my window up, I went, you're very unhealthy. And then I drove away. And as I drove away, you just hear as you see him fade out into the background. Now, I meant you're very mentally, psychologically unhealthy for wanting to kill me, which I would say to anyone in this situation. But that's not what it sounded like. It sounded like I was calling him a fat ass. I just went, you're very unhealthy. And then I drove away. And because I was on this, like, basically synthetic heroin, I didn't care at all. I wasn't even mildly scared or in fight or flight mode or any, like, bad from this dangerous situation. I didn't care. I just literally went back to the car dealership, and the boss said, you're fired. I don't know if he heard about the incident. I don't know if he'd been plotting it, but he just said, you're fired. And I was like, you know what? Okay. And I shook his hand, and then I went home, and I never went near that place ever again. And as I walked out of there, I saw this chick who was, like, his age, and she was so hot. Oh my god, it was his wife, like his trophy wife. But at the same time, she was also repulsive because she was like so pristine and like so prissy that it was like she was a narcissist. And honestly, I know I was acting like a jackass here, like for real, just being a total douchebag here. But like at the same time, this was a sketchy place. They didn't care about any of my documents or anything before I started driving these cars. They hired me after like 20 minutes of interviewing, if even that. They constantly made homophobic jokes about anybody, like even a customer. They'd be like, oh, look at that faggot who just came in. And we're a fucking Kia dealership. And it was just a nightmare, and it was a bad place, and there was this creepy, and I could say this because I don't think any of them are watching this, but there was this creepy dude who worked there. He was like 50 years old, maybe, and he was like 450, 500 pounds. He was really big, and that's not why he was creepy. He was creepy because he had like some ketchup in his desk, and he'd pull out like a dry hot dog for his backpack. He'd be like, and he'd open the desk, pull out like a tube of ketchup, and be like warm room temperature ketchup, and he'd be like, and it'd be like on his lips and everything. It was really horrible to watch. He did it in front of everybody. And he had, the only decoration he had was this picture on the window, and it was of his child who unfortunately passed away due to, like, I think drunk driving or something, which was just such a negative, like, decoration, and that's all that was there. Just a bad scene. So between my sketchy boss, who hired me instantly without caring at all, who looked like a member of the cartel mixed with Key from Key and Peele, he was weird. His wife, who looked like a trophy wife in the Mafia, she looked like a porn star trophy wife, came in and was there and was pretty weird. And then there's these guys, these fucking employees that are like 300 pounds, being like, yuck, 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 we hate faggots. And then there's me pretty much hijacking the cars and being like, way, going through neighborhoods. Yeah, just what a horrible time. What a terrible, horrible time. What a terrible place. What a terrible business model. And they gave me no guidance at all, and I resorted to pretty much doing heroin in drag racing in the cars.
An economical lifestyle in mind, a V6 engine that is both quiet and aggressive. Side view mirror articulation, a pearl white exterior, a sturdy and comfortable steering wheel, comfortable seating, stuffed compactly with polyester, room for up to 7 people in the vehicle, industry standard cruise control, steering assist, customizable settings, dashboard customization, collision avoidance, answer calls, turn on Bluetooth. Gosh, you can even turn the car into different performance modes. Let's not forget about the $1,000 radio sound system. All in all, it's a comfortable ride. A Telluride ride, and the features don't end there. The driving itself is fantastic. The feel of the vehicle itself is fantastic, with extremely smooth steering that makes everything you drive on feel like marble, and a strong center of gravity, reducing any bumps or annoyances when going high speeds. And don't forget to turn your car into sport performance mode. You go so fast for an SUV, it's scary. Whoa, that was way too scary.
So all in all, the Kia Telluride is the greatest, or at least one of the greatest luxury SUVs currently on the market. In terms of miles per gallon, storage space, and economic affordability, you cannot beat the Telluride.
How's it going, guys? Cracked fucking Rack here, and today I am back yet again. Today I'm going to be telling you the story of how I got fired from being a certified nursing assistant for the elderly last year. Keep in mind, I made sure this video is in respect to the law and people's privacy. I'm not going to be revealing anyone's personal information. But anyways, around last year, 2022, I was in a dark place. And I had basically just started the production of a book, which is my novel about a school shooter that I've been working on for basically years. It was inspired by other, disturbing movies. I thought I could try my hand at it because I have way more experience writing scripts than making videos. FBI, by the way, please don't come back ever again. It's a fictional book. Anyway, I realized I didn't have enough money to really fund the whole thing around that time because there's like thousands of dollars to be spent when creating a novel, and I really only had enough money for a few aspects of it, so I decided to just get a part-time job to assist with the book. Now, upon looking at jobs, most of them were garbage, like McDonald's or Kohl's. Like, who the fuck cares about Kohl's? And I didn't want to deal with it, so I looked for more alternative jobs. And with that, I found a nursing position, hiring at a facility that was like 2 hours away from me by car. And it had really good pay, like $24 an hour. But it was really sketchy and in a weird part of town. And the qualifications were horrible. It was like, have a year of customer service skills. And I was like, yes, perfect. I can get a start in the medical industry and hopefully have time to finish my book in between working periods. So I applied, and I got an interview the very next day. I drove out there, and the whole 2 hours away, and at the interview station, there was this really hot manager lady, and 3 ugly, old fucking hags. I mean, these women really looked like hags compared to the attractive woman in the room. And they were elderly. It was like seeing 3 rotten pumpkins surrounding a fresh apple. And what do you know? The attractive manager signaled me to sit next to her. That's not suspicious. There's nothing suspicious about this job listing. Now, at first I was feeling pretty good, like, alright, that signals I must be pretty attractive too compared to these fucking hags. They were actually so gross. I don't mean to be an asshole, but they were like 350 pounds, 80 years old. They had like an unintentional mustache as women. They had that nasty old poopy perfume thing going on. And keep in mind, this was last year, so I was 21, freshly 21, and these hags looked at me like, what is this fucking douchebag doing here? And they ended up being right, because this job was not for me at all. Anyways, I walked out of the building, and I started thinking to myself, something's a little fishy here. The attractive lady wants me to sit next to her, the only straight male. She sure didn't read that out. The pay is $24 an hour. Okay, you're gonna pay me that much after getting this job so easily. And the interview was the easiest thing in the world. This was sketchy as hell. And then I figured out what it was. The catch. I wasn't just gonna be working at a specific place. Oh no. I was gonna be basically a dispatchable 24/7 ambulance for the fucking elderly in Montana. No qualifications to do that. I mean, yeah, I had some experience dealing with like hospice, but not like this. This was nuts, and I had to be in charge of a lot of it. And it also freaked me out because my car was so expensive to run with gas, and that would cost like $500 of gas in the month that I worked there. That was like half the paycheck. I also thought it was really weird that I didn't have to list like really any references. I didn't have to get a license, and they were really nice, but they had so many problems way out of my league to deal with that I had no business trying to solve. Like the first dispatch I had was because the client had fallen over. Then the next dispatch, the same day, I got dispatched again. I had to go to a senior home and stay there for like 11 fucking hours. And that freaked me out because I didn't know how to do this line of work. I was pretending. And if I'm there for 11 hours, that means someone is gonna need something serious from me, which I'm not gonna be able to provide without extensive assistance. So I faked it till I made it, but I didn't make it in the end, basically. I went to the senior home and it was a fucking nightmare. It looked like a building straight out of Manhunt 2. It was really creepy, and it was next to a street where several people would do donuts and drag race each other at 3 in the morning while smoking marijuana. Marijuana so pungent, you could just smell it in the air. And my very first dispatch was that I needed to go into a 500-pound man's room and wipe his butt of all the poop off of it. And it also warned me to be careful interacting with him due to past actions, whatever that meant. So I went into that man's room, I managed to pull him into a wheelchair and take him to a toilet where I profusely wiped his ass. And I mean profusely. It was like a video game of collect the shit. I literally cleaned him dry with many towels and gloves. It was fucking horrible. I hated every second of it, and I think he did too, because he was religious and he didn't want to deal with this, and I certainly didn't either. And I also had to ask him what to do a lot, because I didn't know him. And yeah, after cleaning him up, I basically just had to go give people blood pressure readings and food items. Keep in mind, these were not normal elderly people. These were severely mentally unwell elderly people who could and would potentially sometimes throw shit at you. So a lot of the job really was just arguing with the elderly people. They'd be like, I want a cookie. You basically have to be like, you already ate 9 fucking cookies and you have diabetes. No, you can't have a cookie. And they will likely throw a tantrum, which can get very scary. You think this isn't scary because they're old. Some of these motherfuckers have the body of a 40-year-old and the mind of a toddler, well into their elderly years. There were instances where I had to pull grown men's pants up in underwear above their ass and get really deep in there, which was awful. That trauma stuck with me for a few weeks. Not to be derogatory, but I felt borderline gay after those experiences. So yeah, time went on, and I went to like 50 more dispatches and did a shit job at most of them. Not on purpose. I tried my best, but I think I tried so hard that I was just an anxious mess and I sucked at it. So yeah, time went on, and I went on to like 50 more dispatches, and in between physical labor, I was writing my book, Deplorable Instinct. Basically, the boss one day was like, hey, you did pretty good wiping, so you're gonna go ahead and take care of one of the most vulnerable patients. And I was like, oh, fuck. And I go into her room, and it's pitch black. And I ask her to wake up. And she does. And she's a quadruple amputee. And I helped get her in her wheelchair, got her water, and she also requested to watch American Ninja Warrior a lot, which tells me she liked watching people with limbs, which was just very sad. But yeah, my little crusade here ended around a month later. I got dispatched to my final dispatch, which was an elderly man 30 miles away from me who needed to be showered. So I got in my car and drove to his house, and I did the stupidest thing here yet that basically made me quit. Like, quiet quit. Or get quiet fired, I'm not exactly sure. See, I managed to fake my way pretty well for a while, but that just proved my stupidity for this job. I showed up to his house and walked in, and they looked very weirded out by me, possibly because I was younger. You know, you don't really see a lot of 21-year-old CNAs. They're usually a lot older and more mature. Or maybe they just saw that I wasn't a woman and was worried about what their, religious family member here would think, being showered by a man. So I took him into the shower, and everything was fine. It was only about 15 feet away from the living room, though, which was really awkward. He wasn't too bad, but he did say, "Man, I really wish you weren't showering me right now," quite a few times, and I can't say I blame him. I wouldn't want me to shower me either. So here's the fuck up. After showering him, I had to do a few other things for him in terms of general grooming and hygiene for his head. And I remember I was told to try and make it as luxurious for the client as humanly possible. So I decided that because he had bad legs, he didn't have to stand up to see his facial grooming progress. I'd take a photo for him to see, so he could just sit there on his nice little stool and see it. So I did it, I showed him it, I explained my reasoning for doing it confidently, and then I put the phone back in my pocket. I gave him, I had to rub ointment on him, because of his skin condition, and he was like, yeah, I don't think you're gonna be doing this anymore for me. And I was like, why? Did I do something? And he was like, no, it's not anything you did. And so I then left, and in my car I realized that I walked in there, took their grandfather, who was concerned about being showered by a man, and into the bathroom, and they just heard this. And then I basically leave a few minutes later. That's when I honestly just kind of got embarrassed, and I requested to only work at a specific place. And they were like, meeting time, here's our final offer. The worst shift at the worst place. And I was like, can I get something better? And they hung up. Well, they didn't hang up, but they told me to have a nice day, and I never heard from them ever again. And I can't say I'm necessarily sad about it. And that was it. Over a month of pretty goddamn bad trauma and extremely hard work that puts McDonald's to shame, amounted to $2,000. 2,000 smackaroonies, which helped considerably fund Deplorable Instinct, but it's still not enough, and I could have had a much smoother experience working literally anywhere else. Oh yeah, lastly, I will mention, there was this 30-year-old man living there, and he was super weird, and he was super lonely, and he would just hang out at the senior home by himself. And it wasn't a matter of mental health, because he was very average in a lot of ways, and he didn't know anybody here, and none of the senior citizens liked him, and it wasn't a matter of money, because it was a really expensive home. So what the actual fuck was that guy doing there? These elderly people have fucking COVID-19, and they're coughing that shit around everywhere, and the people are dying every day. Why does he want to live there? He's not a patient. He doesn't have... Not that it's any of my business, I just thought it was super weird. He also asked me if I liked the film American Psycho, as well as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I actually love those film franchises. And it gave me a good idea when he asked this. I gave him a copy of Deplorable Instinct, well, an unfinished early copy, and he said he liked it. He told me a day later. So, yeah, that part was cool. Moral of the story is, don't get a job you're not licensed for, because you'll probably fuck up. I didn't realize that I was supposed to give, like, CPR to the patient if they started fucking dying mid-driving a car with them. I had to drive very long distances with very sick people. So many windy roads and creepy locations, I felt like I traveled to a fucking Castlevania mansion at one point. Anyway, that's all for today. See ya.